This video will describe the design and operation of the new Accu-Facet Jig for the cutting of various angles and facets on wood blocks on the bandsaw. Since that initial design concept, I spent the last several months developing and refining the Accu-Facet system in order to make the system more versatile, easier to use, accurate, and also safer to operate. In this video, I'll describe the components of this latest version of the Accu-Facet Jig, which consists of the L-bracket support plate with indexing pins, the pattern disc, safety shields, handles, ramps, and other accessories that are needed to operate the system safely. Finally, I'll show how the Accu-Facet system operates and how a multifaceted project is finished by sanding it on a disc sander using the same Accu-Facet Jig. Additional videos are planned in the near future to demonstrate applications of this technique for making projects such as these faceted desk clocks and this faceted sphere. I spent the last 4 weeks modifying and improving on this design to make it better, easier to use, and also safer. One of my main concerns in the system was safety. In order to use this, my wood is mounted on here, it's pretty high, and I got the blade running here very high with the blade guards, so I have a lot of blade exposure here. And I'm working here a lot, modifying the wood, and my hands are very close to that blade. And I wanted some guards to protect, so I'd have no chance of running my hand into that bandsaw blade. So I made a couple changes to the system. First change, I added a guard or shield right on the Accu-Sled itself. This is mounted on here, and it runs right next to the blade. I made another shield that runs on this side of the blade, a little bit higher shield. And again, between these two shields, it just protects my hands from getting near that blade. So as I'm loading a piece of wood, I have a handle on my sled here to move the sled. When I'm loading a piece, I bring it back here, I can load my piece, and there's no chance of my hand getting near that bandsaw blade. The heart of the system is this L-bracket support jig, which is a piece of 4x4 angle iron, has a series of holes in the base, a pivot point here, and then a series of holes that are marked from different degrees, going from 0 up to 90 degrees. So that's on the base of the L-bracket support. On the upright, I have some center points. These are again pivot points, and then I have holes for alignment pins. In a previous video, I used a pin, a manual pin I had to push in and out. I've replaced those with some automatic indexing pins, which make it much easier to operate the system. And I'll show that as we run a piece of wood. But these are pins pull out, you can lock them in the open position, and then release them to let them go down. And that pin then locks into your piece of wood on the pattern jig. The pattern disc, again, is in this case made from some Delrin plastic. Has a center hole with a pivot point, which is a shoulder bolt. Has these hole patterns, and these number of holes determine how many segments or how many sides you're going to have on your piece of wood you cut. In a previous video, I used double-sided tape for mounting my boards. That can still be done, but I also put some countersunk holes in here so you actually screw a board to the jig. So screw holds much stronger than double-sided tape. Okay, I've come around the other side of the system to show how it operates, or how it gets set up. And this is my Accu-Sled. The Accu-Sled rides on roller bearings on the rail on the Accu-Slice system. And you have this handle where you can push it through the rail to cause your board to go through the bandsaw blade and make your cut. The L-bracket support plate has a pivot point, and in this pivot point I put a thumb screw, which is a 1/4 20 thread per inch, and that mounts in one of the holes and these hole positions on the Accu-Sled. And these holes are 2 inches apart in all directions, so you can use any of the holes in the system. If I have a small board, I might cut up here, a large board here, or even come out here. If I have a real big board, I can cut out there. So I just mount the pivot point in one of the holes, usually one of the outer holes here. And in the inner holes, I set the angle I want my cut. I would normally have a piece of wood attached to this pattern plate here, and that gets attached with some number 6 screws. And I have 3 sets of holes here. You know, for a small board, you know, I can use, you know, one of the lower positions. I could do a small board, but if I have a bigger board, I can go up to a larger position, where here I can do boards up to almost 6 inches in diameter. And sometimes I take a board like this, when I'm making the first cut, I need a lot of room to clear the corners. Well, after those corners are cut off, I can actually take that same board and lower it to a lower position. Again, being lower, it's a little more stable, less vibration. It's a better way to operate. So these things can all be interchanged. You can move the board back and forth depending on, you know, what you're doing. So once the board's been on here and it's mounted, you would lock it in place with this thumb screw. You know, put your pivot point in, set your angle that you want to cut for your first cut. You know, make your first cut by sliding it through the bandsaw blade. Bring it back to do your next cut. Loosen this thumb screw, loosen the pin position, and start rotating it. As soon as it reaches a hole, it locks in place. Lock it in place, make your cut, and then just keep repeating that. Keeps locking in place. So it's easy to get nice, accurate, you know, faceting and making your various cuts. The other thing is, because this blade guard is so high, I get a lot of sawdust. So I actually did mount a dust collector on the top to try and get rid of some of that sawdust. I also made a better guide, or a better shield for my roller bearings. The roller bearings get clogged up with sawdust quite easily because there's so much sawdust being created by this, you know, high blade with. But the main thing is that the dust collector does the main job of keeping it clean. Okay, I just mounted that piece of walnut to my pattern piece, and I just used 2 screws. That's all I need for this small board. It's a little bit off center, but that doesn't matter. I want to cut a series of cuts around here. This is a 12 segment pattern, so there's 12 index positions. So again, I mount this, and it won't fit in the bottom hole. You know, it's just too big. Check the second hole, and the edge is clear, so I can use the second hole to operate this. And this first cut, I'm just going to do the 12 outer sides. I'm going to do all 12 sides to create a 12-sided cylinder. So I position my Accu-Slice table to where I want to make my first cut. And I lock both my course adjustment knobs and my mag jig clamps. Set my first position, lock, make sure all the thumb screws are tight, and we're ready to start cutting. So again, as notice I was doing that setup, you know, my hands weren't near that bandsaw blade at all. These shields protect me. Notice that when I finish a cut, I move the sled back to a position such that the shield on the sled is in front of the bandsaw blade. That way, when I readjust the board to the next angle, my hands are protected from getting near the bandsaw blade. And now we have our 12-sided piece as a starting point. So 12 sides cut on that. I noticed I moved the whole piece from the jig, and that's no problem. It's all self-aligning, so you can move things. If this were to fit, I could even move it to the lower pin, but it doesn't quite fit, so I'll leave it in the second position. So now I'm going to make some facets on this, starting at the top and working down. So let me start at like maybe 20 degrees for a first cut, going from the center out. So to do that, I just remove my one pin and rotate this to 20 degrees and lock it in place. Next I have to move my index table and set it for my first cut. And I want to cut it that I'm cutting, you know, into the center, or just make sure I get 100% of the facet by cutting just short of halfway through the board on this side, and more than the whole way through on this side. and then lock my table in place. Lock both my course adjustment knobs and also my mag jigs. Now what I'm going to do, and this is a 12-sided disc for my pattern, but for making my facets, I'm going to skip a position. I'm going to cut, 1, 3, 5, 7, and skip, 2, 4, and 6. When I rotate it to the next position, then I use the second set, and that's how I'll get my rotating facets on the piece. So this is 12-sided pattern disc, but now I'm going to be doing 6 at a time, skipping a step in between. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So again, I set my disc, lock it in place to the first position, and now we're ready to make this first cut. Okay, make sure everything's tight on all my screws. I'm using a 1/2 inch, 10 teeth per inch Timberwolf blade for this operation. And I'm cutting, showing here at actual cutting speed. And again, the slower you cut, the smoother the cut. So I prefer to cut fairly slow when I'm making these facets. I then move the pattern disc 2 steps and then lock it in place with the indexing pin, and then proceed to cut the next facet. I continue the pattern of skipping 2 steps with the index pin and slicing the remaining facets. Okay, let me remove this piece so I can show you the cut. And there's our 6 sides. Now what I'm going to be doing for the second cut, I'm not going to cut on this plane here. I'm going to cut here. So my next cut, I'm going to move in about 1/3 of the distance from the center. In other words, this is halfway. I'm going to be cutting right about here on that pivot point. And then cutting a piece out like that. And again, do that 6 times. But I'll be rotating the position, 1 position off of this plane. So the first thing, I want to change my angle. Instead of 20 degrees, now it's going to be 40 degrees. And instead of my plane, I'm going to rotate this 1 position. Lock all my thumb screws in place, make sure everything's tight. And I'll set my table to that correct position. To loosen all my mag jigs and clamps, slide the table in, and then lock it in place. I can use my thumb screw to get a more accurate position if I need to. And lock my mag jigs in place. Again, now repeat the cutting process. So let me remove this piece of wood from the jig again. Show you the result. And there's my second cut. This is my first cut up here with those 6 star-shaped pieces. This is my second cut. Now I'll be making a third cut, and again going another 1/3 of the way down, but going back to the same plane as the first cut. So I'll be rotating it again 1 step, and cut on this point here. So again, on my board, I'm going to be indexing this 1 position and rotating it from 40 degrees to 60 degrees for the next cut. Make sure everything's locked down. And my ramp here is clearing the pieces, making sure they don't get jammed against the blade. And now I have to reposition my table once again for this next cut. Well, I messed up on that last cut. Trying to do a video and cutting at the same time. I actually ended up cutting all 12 of the sides there. I had to just alternate that one, but that's what I got. But it's not a very smooth cut, you know, you couldn't consider that to be a finished piece. So it needs to be sanded. Hand sanding, very difficult. So I did make a jig to go on a disc sander to clean up these facets, to get them perfect and get them nice and sanded nice and smooth. Okay, I was looking for ways to sand these facets on the disc sander, and my regular disc sander back here didn't work. It has a horizontal or a miter bar slot parallel to the sanding disc. And what I really want to do is have something that I can push in and guide in, rather than, you know, slide along the bar here. So I found this new disc sander. It's made by Grizzly, and it has both an X and a Y miter bar slots. So again, I made a plate with multiple holes in it, with a miter bar that slides into the system, and then my jig mounts on here, and I can set it to the different angles and push it in and sand the various facets. So again, it works the same way. I have my pivot point here, and I can set this different positions depending where I want to sand on the disc. And I like to sand towards the inner surface. You know, this outer disc area, sometimes I have to use, but it goes so fast that you can burn the wood very easily if you're not very careful. I wish they made these disc sanders with variable speed motors. You know, I have a 2x72 belt sander, which is it's 3-phase, but it runs off a converter, and I can control the speed on it, which is really nice. I wish this could run slower. So I'll set this to a position here, and I'm going to cut from the inner areas first. So let me cut my 20-degree angle first. So I'm going to set my position, set my 20-degree. Make sure everything's locked in place, and make sure I get the right angle. I'm ready for my first angle. Got my pins in position, everything's locked tight. And I just move this in and lightly touch the disc sander. This is 220 grit sandpaper on here. So it's a pretty fine sandpaper. And what I try and do as I do the facets, I'll try and be repetitive in the amount of sanding I'm doing in each of my facets. So I might go in and say, you know, 1, 2, 1, 2, and that's it, then I'll go on to the next facet. But I try and make them all repeatable, and then after it's done I'll look at it, and if it's not perfect, I can always go back and resand those facets that are not perfect. This is my normal sanding speed. I tend to sand slowly and lightly push the board in until it just touches the sanding disc. Now my Grizzly disc sander has a little bit of a wobble here. I did not mount it to my bench yet. It has a little bit of a wobble, but I'll straighten it out in the near future. And again, I repeat the same process I did in cutting the facets. I skip a step with the indexing pin, lock it in place, and then sand the facet. And repeat that process until all the 6 facets have been sanded. So let me go and do the second facet. So I'm going to change my angle to 40 degrees. And remember to rotate this, you know, one position. I might want to reposition this, but it's fine for now. I can just leave it right where it is. So let me do those 6 sides now on the sanding. So after that first sanding of this second facet, I go and I check my surfaces, make sure all the saw marks are out, and they're not. I still have some saw marks here. So let me put this back on again and repeat it again. Then I'll change the angle to 60 degrees and do the third layer. Okay, I changed my angle to 90 degrees for the final cut, but I think I'm going to move it out a little bit, get a little further from the center. So let me just reposition it to one of these other sets of holes. There, again, set it to 90 degrees. And that completes the sanding on the disc sander. Now, if there are any saw marks, I can always go back and redo them. There's a few minor things here, but I'm going to ignore those. But you can always go back and redo facets if you're not satisfied with it being perfect. Now, I usually do one final sanding on another sander they have on the other side of the shop. So let me go over and show you that. This is one of these sanding discs. It's a 320 grit sandpaper, and I usually do the final buffing on that. Gets it pretty nice. So there's my finished faceted piece. Let me give that a quick coat of bush oil to bring out some of the color and darken the wood. Okay, we're back, and here's the piece after a quick coat of bush oil. Brings out the color and darkens it nicely. And make a nice top for a vase or an urn, or even a desk plate. Well, here's that first piece we just completed with a new jig, which we're calling the Accu-Facet. And here's a couple other pieces we created. Can be a base for a project, flat area. You can mount another vase or a small project on that. Another small piece. In this case, I made two halves and glued them together to make a sphere. So again, quite unique. And this is another project working on where I made a large piece, mounted a clock in it, and that's the desk clock. So I'll be doing some videos on, especially these two projects will be separate videos. As far as the design of the system, it's pretty much finalized. I've gone through like 5 or 6 revisions of the system, improving on it. I have one minor revision to do, because what's happening is as I was cutting this pin down here slipped and was riding on here and causing it to bind up. So I'm just going to move this down, maybe 50 thousandths of an inch, just be enough to clear. That's all I need. So I'll move this one down 50 thousandths, move this one up 50 thousandths, and we'll be totally clear at that point. We're about ready to bring this product to market. It's going to be a very small market because of the cost involved and all the components that are needed. You need not only an Accu-Slice system, but you need the Accu-Sled. Of course, you need the Accu-Facet system with the safety shields and the various pattern discs. You need a grizzly disc sander. So there's a lot of components that are needed just to make this whole system work. But the system will include the L bracket support plate with these indexing pins, a series of pattern discs, mainly the 10 and 12 disc, but I can make other sizes. If you wanted a 5 or 16, we can make those also. You want a handle on your Accu-Sled table so you can push it. You'll need a ramp to take the piece away from the bandsaw blade. You want a dust collection system, and of course the safety shields. There'll be a few additional videos following. I'm already planning 2 videos, one showing how I made these, the sphere, and another video on making these desk clocks. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any additional questions, concerns, or comments, please give us a call or drop us an email. We'll be glad to talk with you. Again, thank you for watching this video.